She'd been pouring drinks at the officers' club for 25 years. Every Friday night, the same generals, the same colonels, the same stories. She smiled. She listened. She never said a word about her own past. Until the night a 3-star general walked in, ordered a whiskey, and she said 5 words that made him drop his glass. "Hello, sir. Long time, Colonel. If this story of hidden rank and unexpected recognition already has you hooked, hit that like button and subscribe." What happens when this bartender reveals who she really was will remind you that the most powerful people in the room are often the ones serving drinks. Now, let's go to that military bar where 25 years of silence was about to shatter with one broken glass. Friday night at 1900 hours. The officers' club was packed. Sarah Mitchell wiped down the mahogany bar for the 1,000th time, her practiced hands moving in circles that could have been muscle memory or meditation. At 58 years old, she'd been tending this bar for 25 years, longer than most of the officers had been in the military. She knew their drinks before they ordered. She knew their stories before they told them. She knew their ranks, their units, their deployments, their marriages, their divorces, their demons, and they knew nothing about her. She was just Sarah, the bartender. 5'6", athletic build that time had softened but not broken. Short brown hair with natural gray streaks she'd stopped coloring years ago, hazel eyes that watched everything and revealed nothing. She wore the same thing every shift. Black pants, white button-down shirt, black vest with the brass anchor embroidered in gold. Comfortable shoes, no jewelry except a plain watch, no makeup, no flash. Invisible in the way that service workers become invisible. Essential but unseen. The Friday crowd was the usual mix. Young captains trying to impress each other with combat stories, majors drowning the stress of command, colonels celebrating promotions or mourning forced retirements. And at the corner table, always the corner table, the general officers who'd earned the right to drink in relative peace. "Sarah!" Colonel Marcus Webb waved from his usual spot at the bar. "Bourbon, neat. And make it a double. I just got my deployment orders. Afghanistan or Middle East?" Sarah asked, already pouring Maker's Mark into a rocks glass. "How'd you know?" "Because you only drink doubles when you're leaving your family." She slid the glass across the bar. "Stay safe out there, Marcus. Always do." He raised his glass. "You should have been a shrink, Sarah. You read people better than anyone I know." She smiled, the professional smile she'd perfected over 25 years. "I just listen, Marcus. Most people don't." He laughed and returned to his group. Sarah moved down the bar, taking orders, pouring drinks, collecting empties, repeating the rhythm she'd lived for 2.5 decades. This was her life now. Simple, safe, anonymous. The past was buried, and it was staying buried. The door opened at 1930 hours. Sarah was restocking beer when she heard the change in the room's energy. The volume dropped. Conversations paused mid-sentence. Chairs scraped as people stood. She didn't need to look up to know what that meant. Flag officer, general rank, someone important just walked in. She continued loading Coronas into the cooler, her back to the room. She'd seen dozens of generals over the years. They were all the same after a while. Men and women who'd climbed to the top and now spent their evenings trying to remember what it felt like to be human. She'd serve him like she served everyone else. Polite, professional, forgettable. "Sarah," called Captain Rodriguez from the end of the bar. "We've got a VIP, 3-star. General Bradford just made theater commander." Her hand froze on a beer bottle. Bradford. The name hit her like a physical blow, a fist to the solar plexus that drove the air from her lungs. Her vision tunneled. Her hearing went muffled. 25 years collapsed into 25 seconds, And suddenly she was back there, back in the desert, back in the war, back when she was someone else entirely. Get it together, she told herself. Breathe, professional. You're a bartender. Nothing more. She finished loading the beer, closed the cooler, and turned around slowly. Lieutenant General James Bradford stood at the entrance, surrounded by a small entourage of aides and hangers-on. He was 60 now, maybe 62, still tall, 6'3", still carried himself with that command presence that made rooms go quiet. Silver hair where there'd once been dark brown, more lines around the eyes, a few extra pounds in the middle, but unmistakably him. 3 stars on each shoulder, theater commander. 25 years ago, he'd been a colonel. And she'd been, no, don't go there. That person doesn't exist anymore. Sarah moved behind the bar, putting the solid wood between herself and the past. She pulled out a clean rocks glass and waited. Bradford would come to the bar eventually. They always did. The entourage would disperse, the admirers would drift away, and he'd want a drink. That's how it worked. She watched him work the room, shaking hands, slapping shoulders, laughing at jokes that probably weren't funny, playing the part of the approachable general, the leader who remembered what it was like to be a lieutenant. But Sarah knew better. She'd seen him in the places where the mask came off, where the stakes were life and death and the decisions were impossible, and the weight of command turned strong men into ghosts. 20 minutes later, as predicted, Bradford extracted himself from the crowd and approached the bar, alone now. The aides had scattered. He pulled out a stool 2 seats down from Colonel Webb and sat with the heavy sigh of a man who'd been on his feet too long. Sarah approached, menu in hand. "Good evening, sir. What can I get you?" He didn't look up. He was studying his phone, probably emails that never stopped coming. Jameson, neat, and keep them coming. Irish whiskey. His drink hadn't changed. Sarah pulled the bottle from the top shelf. The good stuff, not the well whiskey she served to captains. She poured 2 fingers into a rocks glass, set it on a napkin, and slid it across the bar. "Here you go, sir." "Thanks." He still didn't look at her. He picked up the glass, took a sip, set it down, and went back to his phone. Sarah should have walked away, should have moved to another customer, should have let it go. But 25 years of silence was a dam, and dams eventually break. "Congratulations on the 3rd star, sir," she said quietly. "Theater commander is a big responsibility." "Biggest of my career," he said, still looking at his phone. "But someone's got to—" He looked up and stopped mid-sentence. His eyes met hers. Hazel eyes that he'd seen before, in a different context, a different world, a different lifetime. The phone slipped from his hand and clattered on the bar. Sarah watched the recognition dawn on his face. It happened in stages. Confusion first. Do I know her? Then concentration. Where have I seen her? Then impossible realization. No, it can't be. Then absolute certainty. Oh my God. His face went pale. Actually lost color, like blood draining from a wound. "Hello, sir," Sarah said softly. "Long time, Colonel." The whiskey glass slipped from his fingers. It fell in slow motion. At least that's how it seemed to everyone watching. The heavy crystal tumbler rotating end over end, amber liquid sloshing, and then the explosion of sound as it hit the tile floor and shattered into 1,000 pieces. The bar went silent. Every head turned. General Bradford sat frozen, his hand still extended where the glass had been, staring at Sarah like he'd seen a ghost. Because in a way he had, Nero. Colonel Webb was on his feet. "You okay, sir?" Bradford didn't respond. Couldn't respond. He was looking at Sarah, only at Sarah, and his mouth was moving, but no words were coming out. Sarah grabbed a towel and came around the bar, She knelt on the floor, the same floor she'd swept and mopped 1,000 times, and began picking up the larger pieces of glass. Her hands were steady. They'd been steady through firefights and medevacs and moments when the world was ending. They could handle a broken glass. "I'll get a mop," she said to no one in particular. Bradford finally found his voice. It came out hoarse, strangled. "Katie?" Sarah looked up from the floor. Everyone in the bar was watching now, the entire room holding its breath. "No one's called me that in 25 years, sir." She stood up, glass pieces carefully wrapped in the towel. "I'm Sarah now. Sarah Mitchell. I tend bar. Have for a quarter century." Bradford stood up slowly. His legs seemed unsteady. "But you were, I was a lot of things, sir. Long time ago." She moved back behind the bar, putting that protective barrier between them again. "Let me get you another whiskey." "On the house. You look like you need it." "Katie Harris," Bradford said, and his voice carried across the silent bar. "Major Katherine Elizabeth Harris. Call sign Reaper. The finest combat officer I ever served with. They said you died. Operation Desert Falcon, 2000. The entire team was listed as KIA. There was a memorial service. Your name is on the wall at—" "I know where my name is," Sarah interrupted quietly. "I've seen it," the bar erupted. "Wait, what?" "Captain Rodriguez nearly fell off his stool. The bartender is a major." "Did he say Reaper?" "The Reaper? Operation Desert Falcon? That's still classified. Somebody call the MPs." "Quiet!" Bradford's command voice cut through the chaos like a blade. The room went silent instantly. That's what 3 stars bought you. Immediate obedience. He turned back to Sarah. "How? How am I alive? Or how did I end up here?" She was wiping down the bar again. Needed something to do with her hands. Needed the familiar motion to keep her grounded. Both. Sarah looked at him. Really looked at him. 25 years ago, he'd been her commanding officer. Colonel Bradford, task force commander. The man who sent her on the mission that officially killed her. He'd been 35 then. Young for a colonel, brilliant and ambitious, and convinced he was going to change how the military operated. He'd been right. He'd made 3-star general, theater commander. He'd succeeded, and she'd poured his drinks for 25 years without him knowing. "The mission went sideways," she said simply. "You know that part. What you don't know is that 3 of us made it out. We scattered, went deep. The enemy thought we were all dead, so we let them keep thinking it. Safer that way. But you could have come home, debriefed, been reinstated. Could I?" Sarah's voice was sharp now. "Could I really, Colonel? We were disavowed the moment things went wrong. No extraction, no backup. No acknowledgement we even existed. I spent 3 months walking out of that desert. 3 months watching over my shoulder for enemy fighters and American satellites. When I finally made it to friendly territory, you know what I learned?" Bradford was silent. "I learned that I was dead. Officially, legally, permanently dead. Major Katherine Harris was KIA, memorial service held. Family notified. Case closed. And I thought, you know what? Maybe that's better. Maybe Katherine Harris should stay dead. Because she did things in that desert that would haunt her for the rest of her life. And maybe Sarah Mitchell could live without those ghosts. So you became a bartender. I became invisible." Sarah poured him a fresh whiskey, slid it across. "I found a place where I could serve without being seen, where I could be around military without being in the military, where I could remember who I was without having to be her again." Bradford picked up the glass but didn't drink. "You were the best, Katie, the absolute best. 3 silver stars, 2 bronze stars with V device. You were being fast-tracked for colonel. Probably general by now if I hadn't died." Sarah smiled, but there was no humor in it. Yeah, probably, but you know what I learned, sir? Rank doesn't mean anything when you're walking through a desert with a bullet wound in your leg and half your team dead behind you. The only thing that matters is making it to tomorrow, and then the next day, and the next, until one day you realize you're Sarah Mitchell and you pour drinks and you're okay with that. Colonel Webb had been listening, his mouth hanging open. General, is this real? The bartender was really... Major Katherine Harris, Bradford confirmed, one of the finest officers in the history of Special Operations Command. Officially killed in action 25 years ago. Apparently, reports of her death were exaggerated. You going to report this? Sarah asked quietly. Technically, I'm AWOL. Desertion, probably. That's Leavenworth, right? Or maybe Gitmo for Classified Operations Personnel. Bradford stared at her for a long moment. Then he picked up his whiskey and drank it in one swallow. Set the glass down hard on the bar. Report what? He said loudly to the room. I came to the Brass Anchor for a drink. I got excellent service from Sarah, who's been tending this bar longer than most of you have been in the service. I got clumsy and dropped my glass. That's all that happened here tonight. The room was silent. I said, that's all that happened here tonight. Does everyone understand? Yes, sir. The response was immediate and unanimous. Good. Now everyone get back to drinking. That's an order. The noise slowly returned. Conversations restarted. But every eye in the room kept drifting back to Sarah at the bar. Bradford leaned forward. Katie, Sarah. He corrected himself. Why here? Why Fort Bragg? You could have gone anywhere. Because I needed to be near it. Near the military. Near the life. But not in it. She refilled his glass. And because I knew that anyone who mattered from my old life would eventually come through that door. Sooner or later, everyone comes to Fort Bragg. I've been waiting 25 years to see who would recognize me first. And I'm the first? You're the first who matters. She looked at him. The others are gone or dead or wouldn't remember. But you sent me on that mission, Colonel. You looked me in the eye and told me it was essential and that my team would have support. And then, when it went to hell, there was no support. Just radio silence and a memorial service. Bradford's face tightened. I fought for you, for all of you. They wouldn't authorize the extraction. The operation was blown. The enemy knew too much. Command decided it was better to let you be martyrs than risk a rescue that might expose how deep we'd penetrated. I know. You know. I've had 25 years to think about it, Colonel. I know how these things work. I know the calculus. 3 operators versus operational security. I know what decision I would have made in your position. She leaned on the bar. I'm not angry at you. I never was. I was angry at the system. At the machine, at the fact that we were disposable. But you were just doing your job. That's generous. That's realistic. Sarah smiled slightly. You want to know the truth? The real reason I stayed dead, it wasn't anger or fear or even survival. It was freedom. For the first time in my adult life, no one was giving me orders. No one was sending me into hell. No one was using me as a weapon. I could just be. Pour drinks. Listen to stories. Go home. Sleep without nightmares. Be Sarah Mitchell. And it worked? You don't have nightmares? Sarah laughed, a short, bitter sound. I didn't say that. I said I could sleep. The nightmares come with the territory. You have them too. I can see it in your eyes. Bradford nodded slowly. Every night. Different faces. Same outcomes. They stood in silence for a moment. 2 warriors, separated by 25 years and 3 ranks, connected by the same ghosts. What do we do now? Bradford finally asked. You finish your drink. You thank me for my service. The bartending service, that is. You leave a good tip. And you never mention this conversation to anyone above your rank. Can you do that? You want to stay dead. I want to stay Sarah. She met his eyes. Katherine Harris was a good officer, maybe even a great one. But she died in that desert, and I don't want to dig her up. Sarah Mitchell is who I am now, and Sarah is happy. Bradford finished his whiskey, stood up, pulled out his wallet, and laid down $200 bills on the bar. For the broken glass, and for 25 years of excellent service. That's too much, sir. Not for what you did, not for what you gave. He extended his hand. Thank you, Sarah, for everything. Sarah shook his hand. Firm grip, military grip. Thank you, sir, for understanding. He released her hand and started to turn away, then stopped. Sarah? Yes, sir. If you ever change your mind, if you ever want to come back, even in a consulting capacity. He pulled out a card and laid it next to the money. My direct line. No questions asked. I won't call. I know, but the offer stands. He smiled. Stay safe, Sarah Mitchell. You too, General Bradford. He walked toward the door. The room parted for him like the Red Sea. As he reached the exit, he turned back one more time. For the record, Reaper was the best call sign anyone ever earned. You saved more lives than you took. Remember that. Then he was gone. Sarah stood behind the bar, the card and the money in front of her. The room was still quiet, everyone processing what they'd witnessed. Colonel Webb approached slowly. Sarah, is it true? All of it? Does it matter, Marcus? Hell yes, it matters. You're a legend. Operation Desert Falcon is still studied at Bragg. The team that went in never came out, but they completed the mission. They died, Sarah interrupted. They died, Marcus. The mission got completed, but most of the team died doing it. That's what legends cost. Blood. I'm sorry. You've been here the whole time, serving drinks. And you were. I still am, Marcus. I'm still me. Still, Sarah. She picked up a glass and started polishing it. I just used to be someone else, too. But that was a long time ago. Marcus nodded slowly. Your secret's safe. Everyone here knows it? Right. He raised his voice. Everyone here knows that Sarah is just a bartender, right? Right. The room roared back. Good. Marcus smiled at her. Because this bar would suck without you. Sarah laughed. A real laugh this time. Get out of here, Marcus. You've got deployment prep to do. Yes, ma'am. He caught himself. Yes, Sarah. As the night continued, Sarah poured drinks and took orders and cleaned glasses. The routine resumed. But something had changed. Not in her, but in how others saw her. The captains were more respectful. The majors listened more carefully. The colonels met her eyes differently. They knew now. Not all of it. Not the details. But they knew enough. Sarah Mitchell had been Major Katherine Harris, Reaper, Special Operations. The mission that was still classified 25 years later, and she'd chosen to stay dead. Chosen to pour drinks. Chosen to be invisible. By closing time, the bar had emptied. Sarah was doing final cleanup when Captain Rodriguez approached. Young, early 30s. Infantry officer with 2 deployments. Sarah, can I ask you something? Go ahead. Why? You could have been a general by now. You could have had everything. Why give it up? Sarah set down the glass she was drying. You ever been in combat, Captain? Yes, ma'am. Afghanistan. Helmand Province. Then you know what it feels like. The fear, the adrenaline, the impossible choices, the weight of command when lives depend on your decisions. Yes, ma'am. Now imagine living that way for 20 years. Every day, every mission, until you don't remember what it feels like to not be afraid. Until you can't sleep without seeing the faces of the people who died under your command. Until you realize that the military didn't make you a warrior, It made you a weapon. And weapons don't retire. They just get discarded when they're no longer useful. Rodriguez was quiet. So I chose to retire myself, Sarah continued. On my terms. As someone else, somewhere the weapon couldn't follow. And you know what I found? What? Peace, not happiness. Not freedom from the nightmares. But peace, the kind that comes from knowing that no one will ever order me to kill again. No one will ever use me to hurt people. I can just serve, pour drinks, listen, help in small ways, be human. That's why you stayed dead. That's why I stayed Sarah. She smiled at him. Now go home, Captain. Kiss your wife. Hug your kids. While you still can. Before the next deployment. Before the next mission. Before the military turns you into someone you don't recognize. Rodriguez nodded. Thank you, Sarah, for everything. After he left, Sarah finished closing the bar. She locked the front door, shut off the lights, set the alarm. Same routine as every night for 25 years. But tonight felt different. She walked to her car, a 15-year-old Honda Civic, nothing special, and sat in the driver's seat. Pulled out General Bradford's card, looked at it under the parking lot lights, theater commander, direct line. No questions asked, she could call, she could go back, not to combat, but to something. Consulting, training, using her experience to help the next generation. Being Major Katherine Harris again, or she could go home to her small apartment. Pour herself a bourbon, watch the news, feed her cat, wake up tomorrow and tend bar again. Being Sarah Mitchell. The choice wasn't hard. Sarah tore the card into small pieces, let them fall into the cup holder, started her car, drove home, because Major Katherine Harris had died in a desert 25 years ago, and Sarah Mitchell was finally, truly, at peace. The brass anchor was packed for the Friday night rush. Sarah poured drinks with her usual efficiency, smiled at the usual jokes, listened to the usual stories. A young lieutenant approached the bar, nervous, early 20s. Fresh out of ROTC, still had that new officer smell. Ma'am, can I get a beer? And, can I ask you something? Beer's easy. Questions depend on the question. Sarah pulled a draft. What's on your mind, Lieutenant? People say, were you really Major Harris? Operation Desert Falcon? Sarah slid the beer across the bar. That's $7. He paid. Waited. I'm a bartender, Lieutenant. I pour drinks. I listen to problems. I help people forget for a little while. That's all I am. But nothing. Sarah leaned on the bar. You know what the most important thing I've learned in 25 years? What? Rank doesn't define you. Medals don't define you. Missions don't define you. You define yourself by how you treat people. By what you choose to do when no one's watching. By who you are when the uniform comes off. The lieutenant nodded slowly. I think I understand. Good, now drink your beer and relax. Tomorrow you start changing the world. Tonight you're just a lieutenant having a drink. He smiled. Yes, ma'am. As Sarah moved to the next customer, she caught her reflection in the mirror behind the bar. 58 years old. Gray streaks and brown hair, laugh lines and worry lines, bartender's vest, and behind her reflection, hanging on the wall where it had been for 25 years, a framed photo. Small, easy to miss. A unit photo from 2000, 12 soldiers in desert camouflage. In the center, a young major with sharp eyes and a confident smile. Major Katherine Harris. Call sign, Reaper. Status, killed in action. But serving drinks in Fort Bragg every Friday night. The past was never truly buried. It was just redecorated and given a new name, and Sarah Mitchell was okay with that.